Today we have a special crossover episode of Locked On Islanders as Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets joins us. We'll analyze both teams' off seasons, their prospects for the coming season, and we have some bold predictions as well. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are continuing our Metropolitan matchups today with a trip to New York. We're going to talk about the Islanders. We've got my very good friend and colleague at Locked On, Gil Martin, host of the Locked On Islanders podcast. And we're going to talk a little bit about some Islanders. We're going to talk a little bit about some Blue Jackets. And then we're going to finish off by having a little bit of fun with some predictions for how we think the season is going to go. So, Gil, let's just jump straight into it. How do you think the Islanders offseason has gone so far?
You know, it's been disappointing in some ways and okay in others. Lou Lamoriello basically emphasized keeping his own potential unrestricted free agents rather than going out and bringing in somebody new. So you end up with what I think was a terrific extension signed for Ilya Sorokin a year before he was ready to hit the open market. And then you have the re-signing of Pierre Engvall, Scott Mayfield, and Semyon Varlamov to long-term deals to prevent them from going anywhere. Essentially, the Islanders are bringing back the same roster that barely made the playoffs a year ago and hoping that the results will be even better this year.
Do you think Islanders fans are still happy with the work that Lou Lamoriello is doing as general manager? He's been there for a couple of seasons now. Like, is the plan still working, do you think?
I think there's a lot of concern because he has traded away 4 straight first-round draft picks in a row. And if you look at any listing of prospect pools, and, we just had, Locked On NHL prospects do that for everyone. They ranked the Islanders dead last out of the 32 teams in the league. The Hockey News ranked them 27th or 28th. The Athletic was roughly the same. There are no highly regarded, this guy's going to come in and be a top 6 forward or top pair defenseman kind of players in the Islanders prospect pool. So the concern with the way Lou Lamoriello is doing this is you have a lot of players on this roster, especially at forward, who are over 30. And if you look 2 or 3 years down the road, you don't see obvious players in the pipeline who can go out and replace those players. And I guess when you see that the team finished, 7th in the Eastern Conference last year, made the playoffs by 1 point over, Pittsburgh and Florida, Florida was 1 point behind, Pittsburgh maybe 2 points behind. And those teams seem to have gotten better after the season while the Islanders just brought back the same group. That's where the concern is right now for Islander fans.
Yeah, that kind of leads into my next question really nicely, actually. The Islanders seem to have done a pretty good job of kind of competing and managing to stay relevant in a very tough Metropolitan division. How do you think that they've maintained that success over the last 4 seasons? They've made playoffs in 3 of the last 4. Is that due to just kind of, I don't want to say kicking the can down the road, because I don't necessarily think that's what's going on, but obviously trading away your first round picks is a part of that. Do you think they've, what do you think the main success is here?
I think the main success goes back to goaltending. And I think having Ilya Sorokin and, now Semyon Varlamov is clearly the backup, but initially he was the starter. But having 2 quality goaltenders and a system that is designed to first keep pucks out of the net and limit the quality chances of your opposition, playing that style, which is really contrary to the way most teams are doing things in 2023, 2024. But that's what has worked for the Islanders. And they sort of play a playoff style system all year long. And therefore, if they do make the playoffs, they're sort of comfortable playing that style already, where other teams are sort of making more adjustments to play playoff style hockey. But the key is the goaltending. The key is the team defense. You've got, Adam Pelech and Ryan Pollock and Sorokin and Alexander Romanov and Noah Dobson. And it just sort of sets up that they're trying to win a lot of games 3-2 and 2-1. And they've been able to do it enough to make the playoffs, as you said, 3 out of the last 4 years. So.
Yeah. You lost a couple of guys in the offseason, some veterans like Josh Bailey and Zach Parise. Is there a player on the roster that you're kind of circling to take a step up to kind of maybe fill a leadership role that is open with the departure of those older players?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bo Horvat will take over the Josh Bailey kind of role as far as leadership goes. And as far as Parise goes, we don't know for sure yet if he's coming back or not. He has not announced his retirement. He did say on Getaway Day, which was May 1st, I know I'm going back a ways now, but he did say it's either I'm coming back to the Islanders or I'm retiring. So Lou Lamoriello did prepare for life after Zach Parise. They signed Julien Gauthier, who was a speedy skating bottom six kind of a forward, former first-round pick of the Rangers. They signed Hudson Fasching, who filled in when injuries hit last year and played very well in a bottom six role. So they're prepared for life without Zach Parise, but they're also willing to bring him back if he does indeed make that decision to return.
Yeah. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like Lou Lamoriello hates to let things leak. And I feel like no one heard anything about the original signing of Zach Parise until it was done, basically. So do you think there's a chance that training camp's going to hit and he's just going to show up with a shiny new contract?
It is possible he has already signed something. Now, and the reason I even go a step further, you're right about Lou Lamoriello liking to keep things quiet until he has to reveal them. And then the other factor is that right now the Islanders are a little less than $500,000 over the cap. So if they add Zach Parise, even if he signs another, $775,000 a year contract, they go even higher over the cap, and you're not allowed to be more than 10% over during the offseason. So if they wait until training camp and they make another move, if he does, indeed come back, they've got that sort of under control. So, yeah, it wouldn't shock me if Zach Parise comes back. I guess the longer it goes, the less likely, you got to figure by September 10th or so, he's got to make some kind of a public decision. But, I'm not writing it off either, because I think you nailed it when you said, Lou Lamoriello likes to keep things under wraps until he has to reveal them.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't remember who it was exactly, but it may even have been Matt Barzal signing his contract, and it was getting closer and closer, and he hadn't signed it, and then there was one day people it was just oh yeah, Matt Barzal signed.
Right.
And it's a very strange way to kind of do business, but I do kind of respect this. No, I'm not. It's no one's business except our own. It's an interesting way to run an NHL team with which are full of insiders and people just loving to leak contracts basically as soon as they're even being thought about. I want to ask one last question. Do you think the Islanders make the playoffs this season? I think a lot of teams in the Metro got better. Do you think the Islanders, obviously you said they haven't done much. Have they done enough to kind of stay ahead of the curve, do you think?
It's a really tough question. And I think it's going to come down to, does Ilya Sorokin stay healthy and continue to play at the very high level that he's been playing at? If he does, they should be in almost every game that he starts. And I can't say for sure they'll make the playoffs, but I think they will be in the playoff picture right until the very end. And again, I think they're either going to just make it or just miss it. But we're still going to have a lot of 3-2 and 2-1 games, and that's just the way.
That's Islanders hockey, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll flip the script, and you can ask me a couple of questions about the Blue Jackets, because they have done they've done a couple of things this offseason, so we'll do that in just a second here on this crossover edition of Locked on Blue Jackets and Locked on New York Islanders. First, though, I've got to tell you guys about FanDuel, because football season's about to kick off. FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long, because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. All you have to do is pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you're going to get bonus bets for every victory. You could pick the Bengals, the Browns, the Giants. I'm blanking on what the last New York team is, but it's fine. You can use those bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can even bet on things like baseball, which is heading on into playoffs pretty soon. The NHL is going to be back real soon. You can bet on that. And the NBA is going to be back soon as well. So lots to do. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon.
So, Jay, out of all the moves, I mean, the Blue Jackets were very busy in this offseason. Out of all the moves they made, which one do you think will have the biggest impact on the team this season?
It's got to be drafting Adam Fantilli, I think. There's a ton of moves that you can point to. Hiring Mike Babcock is definitely going to have an effect on the team. Picking up Ivan Provorov and Damon Severson from other Metro teams is also probably going to have an effect. But to me, I'm looking at the fact that Adam Fantilli, who would have gone first overall in basically any draft in the last 10 years, except for McDavid and Matthews, and they somehow got him at third. And he might not start the season there, but he's going to finish the season as that first line center probably between Johnny Gaudreau and either Patrick Laine or Kirill Marchenko. He's what the Blue Jackets have maybe never had, and that is a true top-line elite center. And I think he's going to make an impact on this team from day one. I don't know if he pushes the team to be a playoff team, but he immediately makes this team better than they were last season. And I mean, last season they were real bad, but they were also really injured, So There's a ton of things that you can look at. Like getting Zach Werenski back from injury is also going to be huge. I see a lot of people talking about how the Blue Jackets have really only added a couple of pieces. When you look at it, they're kind of adding Zach Werenski back. He played 13 games last season and then was done for the season. Jake Bean played 14. Patrick Laine was in and out of the lineup. Like the only player really that was fully healthy all season was Johnny Gaudreau. That's it. So, there's a lot being added, but I think Adam Fantilli is he's going to be the guy to watch for this team.
And how excited is the fan base about his arrival and what he's going to bring to the team?
Oh, so excited. Like they had a watch party in Columbus for it, and the reaction to the Ducks picking Leo Carlsson and then the reaction to the Blue Jackets taking Adam Fantilli is just really, really fun. I'm trying my best to kind of temper my expectations. It's so easy to go into this as he's the best player that the Blue Jackets have ever had, and he's going to win the Calder, and he's going to win the Hart, and he's going to score 1 million goals, and the Blue Jackets are going to win the Stanley Cup because of him. It's so easy to kind of get caught up in that excitement. So I'm trying to temper my expectations and keep a level head and okay, he's going to be good, but he's not going to be Connor McDavid immediately or maybe ever. But there's a lot of excitement in the fan base, I think, because we'd kind of accepted this sounds really dramatic. We'd accepted our fate as having to draft Leo Carlsson, who's going to be very, 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 very good for Anaheim. But I think a lot of people were disappointed that the Blue Jackets fell from second to third, with the Blackhawks jumping up to first. And so to get the player that we'd kind of been coveting in that second overall spot at third, I think everyone is just it's like when you get what you wanted for Christmas, despite the fact that your parents have been saying they can't afford it all year. That's kind of the feeling that I think a lot of fans have with Adam Fantilli.
No doubt, and that's a great surprise. Let's put it that way. Once draft day was underway, got to ask about the goaltending. It obviously has been an issue. Is Elvis healthy, and can he return to the form he showed previously to help this team in between the pipes?
God, I hope so. I would love to say with any kind of more certainty what kind of Elvis we're going to get this season. But it's just, I mean, goalies are so hard to predict. Sometimes goalies just show up and have a Vezina candidate season, despite having shown no inclination for that before. Sometimes Vezina candidate goalies show up and they can't stop a beach ball. It's this goalies are mysterious and no one understands them. I would love Elvis is not going to be the worst goalie in the league this year, which was what he was last season. He was the worst goalie in the league, like statistically speaking. He's going to be better than that. I don't think the Blue Jackets need him to be Ilya Sorokin in the same way that the Islanders need Ilya Sorokin to be a top 3 goalie in the league, I think, to stand a chance in this division. I don't think the Blue Jackets need that from Elvis. If they can get, I've been saying on Locked on Blue Jackets, if they can get league average goaltending from Elvis, which last season was a .904 save percentage, if they can get Elvis to have a .904 save percentage this season, in my mind, they're probably a playoff team. Also, they don't have the life raft of Jonas Korpisalo anymore. He was a veteran goalie that the team could fall back on when Elvis struggled, as he has done, multiple times over the past couple of seasons. His backup this season is going to be Danil Tarasov, who is very young and untested, but has tons of potential. I think they're going to be less willing to kind of put the weight of the season on Tarasov than they would be on Korpisalo. So there's a lot of pressure there for Elvis to be the guy because they don't really have a backup guy. They've got a backup, but they don't have a backup guy, So it's gonna be interesting. But yeah, if we can get league average out of Elvis, I will be just the happiest podcaster ever.
Talk to me about the defense. You mentioned Provorov and Severson. How much better can the defense be? I mean, you talked about getting league average goaltending. How about getting league average defense?
It doesn't feel like a hugely hot take to say I think the Blue Jackets will have better than league average defense this season. Like I mentioned, getting Zach Werenski back is huge. That was kind of the beginning of the end for this team, was they were kind of floating about, keeping their head above the water, and then Werenski went down, and it just kind of just nosedived. So having him back is huge. Getting guys like Provorov and Severson to be second pairing defensemen is also huge. I think they're going to take a lot of the pressure off Werenski. I think they're both incredibly durable guys. Neither of them get hurt a lot. I'm going to just knock on wood about that. So if they can stay healthy, that's something the Blue Jackets haven't had for a couple of seasons, is defensemen that can stay healthy. So that helps. Erik Branson is going to be hanging around, but he's going to be on the third pairing, which means probably we will get a much better Erik Branson this season. He, I believe, had the second most ice time of any defenseman on the Blue Jackets last season, and he was at one point their first pairing defenseman. He was their top defenseman after Vladislav Gavrikov was traded at the deadline. So it was a tough year for defense. It was Erik Branson and a bunch of teenagers for large parts of the season. I think David Jiricek is going to show up at camp and be ready to go. So he slots in on that first pairing with Zach Werenski in a perfect world. And then, if it doesn't, they've got a lot of pieces. The Blue Jackets have, at my estimation, between 10 and 12 NHL-ready defensemen right now. So it's going to make for some interesting choices in training camp. And honestly, I'm still not convinced that they're not going to move at least 2 defensemen before the season starts.
And what would the need be that they would be looking to get in exchange if they do trade away 2 NHL caliber defensemen?
I would think picks, maybe forward prospects. They're a little light on left wing at the minute, but they've got some good centers in the lineup. Their defense prospect pool is maybe the deepest in the NHL. I'm biased a little bit, but I stand by that. Goaltending, they're okay. I could see them maybe picking up picks and maybe a veteran goalie if they could get, like a Semyon Varlamov type to play in that backup role, or even, I know they just signed Aaron Dell to a PTO for training camp. If they can get him to kind of float around between Columbus and the Cleveland Monsters, their AHL affiliate, he just provides kind of another layer of stability. So I'm looking for someone like that. But yeah, I would love picks and prospects that are probably going to be bubble NHL players, but are not immediately NHL ready, because there's kind of a log jam in NHL ready players for the Blue Jackets at the minute at both forward and goaltend and defense. Excuse me. There's going to be a lot of tough training camp decisions, so it's really tough to kind of predict the lineup at the minute, because I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, they've got 16 forwards that can be in the NHL. They've got 10 defensemen. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Training camp's going to be really, really interesting. And I think training camp might be when you start seeing things kind of start to move in terms of defensemen. Because if David Jiricek plays himself into a spot, then that leaves Adam Boquist, Jake Bean, Andrew Peak, and Nick Blankenberg all competing for one spot. Yeah. And Blankenberg's the only one that's waivers eligible, and the other three are too good to play in the AHL. So what do you do with them? So it's going to be interesting.
Last question for the segment. Other than Adam Fantilli, who are some of the other young players that we should all be aware of that may make the Blue Jackets this year?
I mentioned David Jiricek.
Yes.
He's kind of the other big one. A guy that people have probably heard a little bit about but are not super up on is a player called Dmitry Voronkov. He was drafted, I believe, in 2018 or 2019. He's been over in the KHL. He's coming over kind of like Kirill Marchenko did last season. He is going to be a big, mean forward that is, he kind of has that Ovechkin style play of he can score, he can pass, he can hit, he can skate. He's going to be a great depth guy for this team that will probably turn into an upper depth guy. In terms of other guys that could make the roster, I'm blanking on like roster locks. Those are the guys that I think will probably be making their Blue Jackets debut. There's a couple of other guys that are going to be making their Monsters debut that could get called up, but those are the three guys I think at the minute that other teams should probably watch some tape on. All
right. Well, we will come back and make some predictions for the upcoming season, and it's only we're less than a month away from training camp, so it's getting pretty close.
I know. I'm excited. Okay, let's go back to the Islanders for a minute here. Who's your pick to be the MVP for the Islanders this season?
I got to stick with Ilya Sorokin. I mean, he is their best player. He was second in the Vezina voting last year. And, if the Bruins didn't have such an amazing season where Linus Ullmark led the league in win, save percentage, and goals against average, how do you vote against him in the Vezina voting? So I think Sorokin will probably play about 55, probably start 50 to 55 games. And if he continues to play at the high level he plays in, the Islanders should be in almost, let's say 85, 90% of those games should be fairly low scoring and fairly close. And I think he really holds the key. If he gets injured, I mean, I like Varlamov, but is he still capable of playing 55 games a year if he has to? I wouldn't be as confident in that. So, give him 30 games, 35 games, I think he'll be great. And then the other thing is, if I had a second choice, Bo Horvat, he had less than a point every other game after the trade. Now, part of that was because Matthew Barzal was hurt and he didn't have the line mates that you would expect him to be playing with on a top line. But look, I don't expect him to be as offensively productive as he was in Vancouver because the Islanders' style is more defensive. But he's got to at least give them 65, 70 points, 25, 30 goals to justify the $8.5 million a year contract that he signed. And the next 8 seasons, he'll be making that money. So those two players, I think, are kind of linchpins for this team being at least as good, if not better, than they were a year ago.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna let you in on a little bit of a secret. Last week on Locked On NHL, we talked about the top 5 goalie poll that we did to kind of gel the offseason wheels, so to speak. And I did have Ilya Sorokin as my number 1 goalie in the NHL. He would have been my pick for the Vezina as well. Not to say that Linus Ullmark was not incredibly good this season, but I do think he probably had a little bit of an easier season than Ilya Sorokin. So I'm a big Sorokin fan. I think he's going to be really annoying every time the Blue Jackets play him. And hopefully he continues his Vezina candidate ways. Who do you think is going to win the Metro division? Because in my mind, there's really only two answers, but I'm interested in which way you go with it.
I will give a slight edge to the young up and coming Devils team over Carolina, but I think it could go either way. But I'm going to say this is the year the Devils pass the Hurricanes and win the division. How about you?
I'm still going with the Hurricanes. I think it's going to be close. It was real close this year, I believe. I think they had 1 point difference.
Yeah.
The Hurricanes just overtook them at the end there. But I think experience is just going to beat out youth in this case. But I agree. I don't think it's very long at all before the Devils take over, because that is an extremely annoyingly well-built team.
I agree. And, the reason that you may be right in my mind, and the reason I'm sort of hesitating on picking the Devils, Rod Brind'Amour is such a good coach. And I think he gives them...
The Hurricanes got better this offseason.
Yeah. Oh, they did.
I think Dmitry Orlov is one of the most underrated defensemen in this league. So it's hard to bet against the Hurricanes. I know that they've been swept like 3 Eastern Conference finals in a row, but it's just so tough to bet against the Hurricanes.
It is. It is. I'm trying to say it either happens this year or next year. And I'm like, really torn as to who to pick, but I want to be different. So I'm going with the Devils, but by that much.
It's going to be very, very close. Yeah,
exactly.
Let's finish up with, you can't pick the Islanders for this.
Right.
Who's going to win the Stanley Cup this season? Not that I think you would pick the Islanders anyway, but I've been telling that to every host that they can't pick their own team, but it only seems fair.
Wow. The Stanley Cup this season. Wow, that is a tough one at this point to pick. You know what? The Carolina Hurricanes get it done. I think.
You think this is their year?
I think this is their year. They may not win the division. They may, but I think this is the year they finally get past that conference final and find a way to get it done.
Yeah, I feel like, how for years and years and years, the Capitals just couldn't get past the Penguins, and then they finally did, and they won that cup. It feels a little bit like if the Hurricanes can just get past, if the Hurricanes can win a game in the Eastern Conference final, it feels like they'll kind of slay that demon, so to speak. It's the same reason I think everyone was like, oh, Toronto finally won a round, they're probably going to go all the way, and then obviously Florida happened. But feels like if they can make it to the Stanley Cup final, I don't know that there's a team in the West that's going to have an easy time against a team like the Hurricanes. I've been saying the Dallas Stars all offseason, which annoys me intensely because I have logical reasons for disliking most of the NHL teams I like. I have no logical reason for disliking the Stars. They're just my enemies. And they're so good, and they're so well constructed, and they're so fun to watch. And again, it feels like they have just they're so close to kind of jumping over the hill of the Stanley Cup final.
They are a very good team, and maybe because they play in a non-traditional market, they don't quite get as much respect as I think they deserve. But, they've been, like you said, they've been close for a few years now, and I think, that is a team to be reckoned with, no question about it.
Yeah, I didn't realize until I was watching them last season, and I've kind of just ignored the Dallas Stars as much as I can because, again, I don't like them. And I was watching the Blue Jackets play the Stars this season, and I was like, oh, this is an extremely good team, especially in transition, on the rush. Jason Robertson is incredible. The ageless wonder, Joe Pavelski, they've got maybe one of the best young goalies in the league in Jay Cottinger. It's another team that's tough to bet against.
Yeah.
As much as I dislike it, I'm going to have to go with Dallas. Carolina would be a really fun Stanley Cup final, in that I think it would make every single Canadian hockey fan's head explode.
Probably.
And that feels like a good enough reason for me.
So getting to the Blue Jackets, do you think they make the playoffs this year?
Yes. But it's going to be tough. I think it really relies on, there's a lot of moving parts here. The Blue Jackets, as constructed on paper right now, should be a playoff team, I think. I'm looking at kind of the other teams in the division, and I honestly, it might come down to the Blue Jackets and the Islanders fighting for that final playoff spot. That's what I think it's going to be. I think the Blue Jackets could finish anywhere from 4th in the division to 6th in the division. I think the Devils, the Hurricanes, and the Rangers probably get spots 1, 2, and 3, and then 4, 5, and 6 is probably going to be some combination of the Capitals, the Penguins, the Islanders, the Blue Jackets, and I think the Flyers are probably going to be at the bottom of the division. So they're good enough to make the playoffs, I think. It just depends on if things go right. I do think there's going to be 5 metropolitan teams in the playoffs this season.
I think it's very possible, especially after the Karlsson trade with Pittsburgh. I think they got better, at least in the short term there. I think we're going to have a lot of crossover episodes between you and I later in the season to sort all of this out, because it very well may come down to the wire. And at the very least, it'll be very entertaining all the way. So
yes, they play very different styles of hockey, so it'll be interesting to see what style of hockey wins that particular battle. But I am looking forward to the. It's always fun to play in Long Island. I feel like the Blue Jackets always have a good time, even if they don't always win. So hopefully they'll win more often than not, for my sake, if not for yours. But I think that's all we've got for today. Everyone, thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked on Blue Jackets and Locked on Islanders are both available wherever you get your podcasts. They are available on YouTube. They are available on Sirius XM. You can find me at _Jacob Forster. Gil, where can people find you on Twitter?
It's Ice Wars NYR VS NYI. And check out Locked on Islanders, Locked on Blue Jackets, and have a great weekend, everybody. All right. Thanks again to Jay Forster of Locked on Blue Jackets for joining us and doing this special crossover. We will be back on Monday, of course, as we will continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders' top prospects and a whole lot more. Thanks again for making Locked on Islanders your first listen every day. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe. And, of course, let's go Islanders.